as a bluff, which is, by the way, a very bad idea. So you're going to need 2 weeks to do this, and then 4 weeks once you give notice, because your notice gives plenty of time for you to make a good transition period, which we'll talk about how to prepare for.
And don't forget about, it's 6 weeks, then in addition, travel and move time.
Right, exactly. I'm sorry. Yes, if you're moving from New York to Los Angeles, or from Caracas to New York, or from Maranello to Stuttgart, or Stuttgart to Miami, you need to take into consideration family considerations in that. And if it's going to take you 6 weeks to move, then you need to tell the company that you're coming to that you need 12 weeks. And that may sound like a lot, and if that's the case, then you need to be very careful about how you plan this. Okay, so 6 weeks.
Okay.
From the moment you know you're going to leave. What that means is, relatedly, you need 6 weeks of cash. The day you talk to your boss, you may get asked to leave right then, immediately. And yet, depending upon who your boss is, how effective the organization is, what kind of cash situation there is. This applies to small firms too, because it depends on their cash situation. Many firms do not have payroll money in a payroll account on the 17th of the month, period. In fact, I would argue that most firms do not. It may take you a month to get your check, and they're going to think, well, gee, if he's resigning, then he knows where he's going, and maybe he's already getting paid or whatever. And so, yeah, we should be giving his paycheck at the end of the month, but because we haven't figured out how much additional leave he's accrued, and we got to pay him for his vacation days, and there's a sick day policy, we can reimburse him for that. So they hold your check for another month, and suddenly you resign on the 17th, and you're not getting paid until the 30th of the next month. That's 6 weeks. And heaven forbid, but your boss, nice person though she is, may, in a fit of retribution, delay things intentionally to extract a pound of flesh. We don't like that, but we've seen it happen, and we're careful about it.
Right, and the fact that you're being professional and giving, 4 weeks notice, for example, doesn't mean they don't walk you out that door and terminate you immediately with no notice whatsoever.
Boy, I'm so glad you said that, Mike, because I have to tell you, the number of people that I've talked to, particularly young people, I've talked to a number of them under the age of, let's say, 28. No offense, those of you under age 28, I love you. And I've actually had people say, well, when I give 2 weeks notice, then I have 2 more weeks, right? No. What you're saying is that's the maximum amount of time you will work. They can say, okay, you're done, thanks. Because there's a risk. Now if you're thinking about going somewhere else, clearly your loyalties may, or in fact do, lie elsewhere, or at least in a joint state of some sort. And so they don't like that. When you're only employed by them, and that's your only loyalty professionally, and so therefore they can trust you. When you have other loyalties required by the nature of you accepting an offer somewhere else, that's the assumption they've made, they may not be able to trust you, and so the door slams in your face or right behind you as you walk out of your boss's office.
Right. So if you say you need 6 weeks, 2 weeks to prepare, then you want to give them 4 weeks notice. They send you out, they escort you to the door immediately, then that suggests that it's pretty important that before you resign, you actually have a job.
Yeah. Oh, and just mention one more thing about cash, Mike, is that during times of job transitions, even if you're going to the best job in the world, it's enormously stressful on your family. And you don't want to add to that stress by creating cash flow issues, which of course, most families are a cash business, if you will, as opposed to an accrual sort of business. And you're actually going to be burning through more cash during the transition period than you normally would, particularly if there's a move involved. So if nothing else, the 6 weeks of cash has to do with the fact that you could affect how well you handle your transition if your state of affairs at home is completely riled or roiled by the fact that you don't have the cash to get through this short period of time. Even if you're getting a $20,000 raise, that company's not going to give you a big signing bonus before you come to work. Or they'll only do that in rare cases, let's put it that way.
Yeah, a good point.
Okay, but your point was about getting another job first, and one hopes this is intuitively obvious. And my point about having another job it's really not about ethics. We were talking about this at the start of the show. This is really about cash and about protecting yourself. If you feel compelled ethically to resign, fine, do it. Wait 2 weeks before you resign to do your preparation, and then give 4 weeks notice. You don't have to tell them you're resigning for ethical reasons, although if you choose to do that, if you want to get on your moral soapbox, that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that unless the value of being on the moral soapbox falls on deaf ears and there is a negative cost to there's a cost to you. There's a negative implication for
we're not animals. I mean, this is you can space 2 weeks between the stimulus of whatever happened that's causing you to resign and the response, which is to resign.
Well said. Separation of stimulus and response.
Dog here.
Yeah. They poked you with an ethical umbrella, and you're going to choose how you're going to feel about it.
Yeah, if you don't know what that umbrella means, and you got another podcast to listen to.
And there are plenty of stories of people who said, I knew then what I was going to do. I knew then I was going to resign. And they're smart enough to say, and then I started thinking about how do I want to do that? Because the moment of decision, as you say, the stimulus can be separated from the response or the activity. If you feel compelled at that moment to create a paper trail for whatever reason, because things are awful, send yourself or your spouse an email from a home account with a memorandum for record, MFR, which says, on this date, because of this situation, I decided to resign. Don't send it from work.
Yeah. Well, hey, look at last time I resigned, I waited 2 months from the time I made the decision I was going to resign to the point where I actually resigned. 2 months.
See, that's strategic thinking. Okay, what's the timing? How do I do this? I have many stories, maybe not 2 months, where somebody said, okay, look, I know I'm going to resign. I know that my work is going to suffer because of that decision, because of something going on with my wife or with my husband or with something at another location or another offer. And I simply refuse to leave my boss, the EVP or whatever, in the lurch, or regardless of whether I play a big role right now, in the next 3 months, anything I do to upset the apple cart will have significant impact on strategy or marketing or whatever else across the organization, and so I'm going to wait. And quite frankly, if things go well, I want to be here when something good happens. There's something to be said for being an employee when good things happen. So, but look, resigning without another job is just dumb. I've seen some people do it to kind of show off. I still think it's dumb. Resigning when you can choose not to, if it's going to make things harder for you, I think is just dumb. So get to the job first. In fact, this goes to a point that we talk about in our set of interviewing casts, Mike, which is never resign a job or turn an offer down until you accept the other one. I've had people say to me, well, Mark, this one's going to come through, so I'm going to go ahead and resign because it's convenient for the company, whatever. No. You must accept the other offer. They must accept your acceptance. You must have all that stuff worked out, and then you resign. Now, admittedly, that's going to extend the amount of time this takes. I'm not going to kid you there. And the hiring company will be flexible on that. And if they're not flexible, if they say you got to leave in a week or two, you have to balance, okay, how willing am I to throw my friends in my organization and the place where I've worked professionally and ethically for the last blank period of time overboard just for this other offer?
And what does it say about your prospective new employer?
Yes, exactly. Or for that matter, how likely you are for them, if something happens, how likely it is for you to stay or for them to feel like you should stay. Yeah. They're willing to throw you overboard. Yeah. Okay, next. You have to assume, and this one surprises me, with as many TV and shows and movies where firing is an issue and the emotional shame of it comes to the forefront as part of the emotional energy of the show. You have to assume you're going to lose access to everything immediately. It can shock people.
I'll go even further, Marcus, which, just, give your employer the opportunity to do something different, but assume, you're going to resign. They're going to, 2 guards are going to show up and they're going to escort you out the door immediately. So
yeah,
that's a good assumption. In most cases, it won't be true, but it may.
Right. What this does is if you assume this now, it encourages you to do the right preparation so that when you actually do it, it won't be a shocker. If you see those guards, it'll be like, well, okay, I've done what I needed to do and fine. And at that point, the company loses all rights, if you will. If they're going to treat you that way, they lose all rights to any behavior you would do after the fact. I would still argue that the right thing to do is to take care of your team. But if the organization won't let you, then you're not under any obligation to fulfill something that they won't let you fulfill.
Let's be clear why that is too. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's not these are not evil people. You're well, in most cases, I have met some evil ones, but remember, I came out of WorldCom, so. The fact of though, in the vast majority of cases, people. That's why we're doing this resignation podcast. People do it so poorly, and some people do it so poorly and act so unethically in terms of what they do when they resign and how they go about it. That that's what happens. Procedures get put in place to protect the organization, and so a lot of time employers act as if you're going to do the worst thing possible, which is probably not true.
And if the manager doesn't know how to lay somebody off or know how to accept a resignation, which is an upcoming cast, at some point in the future, don't read upcoming as being in the next couple of weeks, but if you don't know how to accept someone's resignation, how to handle that well, then you're going to respond as aggressively simply because you know that this person, you no longer need to, this person who's resigning is no longer someone you need to worry about your relationship with, hypothetically. You start shutting down and saying, okay, who do I need to worry about? Well, what I need to worry about is my boss in HR. So how can I be sure that I do the right thing by them? Well, I probably overreact so that I can be sure that I'm not caught losing state secrets or those kind of things. So managers not knowing what to do, overreact, and you're caught in the crossfire if you're the one resigning. It's not personal. It's just managers who don't know how to handle a standard managerial behavior, managerial duty, which is accepting someone's resignation.
Yeah.
Gosh, we have a lot of casts to do, don't we, Mike?
We do. Don't remind me.
Now, something else that I think is really helpful, if you start thinking this way, if you think this way for 2 weeks as you go back and forth to the office, getting ready to proffer your resignation, you will see how much stuff at your office that you take for granted, that you touch all the time, that because we touch it, we think it's ours, in fact, is not yours. And you need to ask yourself, how can I hold on to this, provided it's reasonably ethical that I should be allowed to have some part of it. A lot of the stuff that you think of as yours at your desk is in fact not yours. In fact, other than your family photos and anything you brought in, nothing is yours. You're entitled in some cases some copies. We'll talk about that, but I think it's important you go into the mindset of I'm going to lose access immediately. Happened to Michael Douglas in Disclosure. Here's an executive with full sysop privileges or sysadmin privileges, and whammo, something comes up at work and suddenly he has no rights to do anything on the email system. And because that's the lingua franca of the organization, he's essentially, persona non grata almost immediately. So you have to assume it. Otherwise, you could get caught unawares. And you got to be careful. Look, you got to be careful about work emails. Email has morphed into something that's almost like a conversation. We put things in emails that we used to only talk about verbally outside of the office because somehow we think it's private. It's absolutely not. And your emails can get checked and do get checked. So start being careful the moment you realize you're going to resign.
Well, we'll stop there and continue next week. In the meantime, if you have any questions or suggestions, please stop by the discussion forums at www.manager-tools.com/forums, or you can always send your comments to show@manager-tools.com. Thanks, folks. We'll talk again soon. So long. Welcome to the Manager Tools Podcast for Monday, July 31st, 2006. Hi everyone, this is Michael Ozan, and welcome back to Manager Tools. Today's show is part 2 of our 3-part series on resigning.